Welcome to the Off the Fritz podcast, honest conversations that explore life with intention.
Our podcast is a collection of honest stories and conversations with people who have learned and are continuing to learn to live with direction and intention, even when life gets crazy.
Our hope is that this podcast will inspire you and provide you the tools to start living with more intention and a sense of possibility and purpose. Hey everybody, welcome to a conversation that we had with a great guy, Alan Toscano, I think. Yeah. Toscano. It's
sorry, Alan.
Yeah, sorry if it's pronounced wrong. Toscano, Alan, yeah. Anyway, Alan was a great guy. Really, really nice guy. Really fun to talk with. Interesting guy. Who is Alan?
Alan is the guy behind Dream Big, Live Tiny on Instagram. He has a large Instagram following, and honestly, Alan has been to the nicest tiny homes, tree houses, cabins, and spaces all over the world. I live a little vicariously through his ability to travel so free and just to go to the places that he goes and sees what he sees. He is just awesome at his film and photography skills and just the way that he is showcasing the diversity within the tiny home movement.
Well, there was an interesting part in the conversation. We kind of discussed the growth of the tiny home movement and how it's not this single path to growth, and how, you know, there's value in the way that he's approaching this. And there's some really neat points. He's just a well thought out guy, and just a really nice guy as well. So
he just really shared his dreams and his hopes and his aspirations of where he's going on in life. And we are huge cheerleaders of Alan. And I hope you really enjoy this conversation and deep dive into who's behind Dream Big, Live Tiny.
Enjoy, guys. Alan, hey, really nice to meet you, man. Thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate your time. Appreciate you chatting with us.
Yeah,
thank you guys so much.
Where are you joining us from today?
So I'm in Austin, Texas. So this is where I live full time. So usually when I'm not out shooting houses or doing some other work, I'm usually here in Austin.
That's awesome.
And you live in a tiny house, right?
I do. Yeah, I do. I've been living in my tiny house now almost 2 years, actually, to the day. I think it was like October of 2019, mid-October. So I was looking at the calendar. The time has flown, but a good portion of that has been.
How do you feel about it
today?
Compared to how when you first moved in, 2 years later?
That's a great question. I think initially I was just really excited about everything, and nothing seemed like a problem. It was just like, yeah, we'll work with. So I don't know if you guys even know this side of the story, but I purchased this tiny home used in 2019. And so this tiny house had been lived in prior by an architect, and she designed it herself, and her father's a contractor, so he helped her build it, and basically completely custom designed to her needs. And she lived in it for almost 2 years, and then basically put it up for sale. She wanted to try van life and just move on to the next adventure. And so I reached out to her. At that point, I had been considering doing either a custom build or maybe even trying a DIY build, though I wasn't too enthusiastic about that idea, but it was still on the table. And then this whole used tiny house marketplace, I don't remember exactly which website or how I found it, but I got in contact with this woman, and she, was ready to move on to the next adventure. And I really wasn't sure like what to think about it. This is a house built for someone else's needs. Is it going to work for me? But I drove all the way to Kansas to go look at it. And I brought my dad with me, and I brought my mom with me, and they're like, hey, we'll just come along for the adventure. Like, if anything, it's a great road trip. We'll come back, right. And, it is what it is. And I fell in love with the house when I saw it. And obviously it wasn't perfect. It wasn't, built for my needs, but there was something about just like taking something that, was already built and was going to be, moved on from. And I said, hey, I think I can make this work. And so what I ended up doing is I bought it, but I made quite a few changes to it. I painted everything, the interior, exterior, added a few things that I needed. And here we are 2 years later, and it's really been nice. And of course it's not perfect. It's, something that was originally built for someone else, but I've grown to really, really love this space. And I've spent so much time in it the last year and a half, with the pandemic and everything. So right. Yeah, I really love it. Yeah.
So knowing what you know now about what's perfect and what's not perfect, if you were to go to the drawing board with someone, like if you and I sat down,
yeah,
do you believe that the perfect tiny house for you exists? Or not exists, but do you believe it could exist?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of things I would change about this design. One thing that, and my girlfriend, she'll attest to this as well because she comes over every now and then, is I wish I had a fixed dining setup, or at least something that was a lot easier to set up. So right now I have this basically like folding table that I store under my couch, and it works. It was kind of like a quick fix that I purchased like 2 years ago when I was like, I need somewhere to eat dinner. I have a fixed desk that I use for work and everything, but it's something about like eating and working in the same exact space that doesn't really work for me. But yeah, there's definitely a few things that I would absolutely incorporate into a custom design, and I think there is a perfect tiny house for me out there. And I think that's the beauty of working with a team like you guys is, you can really dream up your perfect tiny house from start to finish and really get there.
You know what's interesting that you say, like the idea of having to pull out that table? It's something that I've had in my mind is like, I always try to imagine it's my home, even though I'm designing for somebody else. I imagine it's mine, but I'm them, I guess, if you can get your head around that. But I guess one thing that I always thought is like, I would hate, like, I think there's so many ingenious solutions for like space-saving things in the tiny home world. But if you got to like learn how to use it or pull out the manual, you got to like pull things apart and click them together in order just to have breakfast. I always feel like that's going to get old pretty quick. So one of my motivations is always like, I feel like there's these, like I said, these ingenious solutions, and I think the next level of wisdom is to simplify it and like make it work, but make it way simpler. And so that's always one of my big motivations. Like I kind of stop myself at that, like, hey, this is cool, and then be like, okay, what's less cool but actually works better in a way, right?
No, I love that. I love that. It's a great way to think about things. And I think that's sort of like the essence of tiny living. It's like you have all these grand ideas and you have, all this Pinterest inspiration, but at the end of the day, it's trying to make sure that it's functional for your needs, like everyday needs, especially, because it definitely is not fun to take out that table every morning, but I have to do it. So we get it done.
Yeah, you bet.
Alan, can I ask you, like, on your journey, what motivated you to go tiny? How did you get here?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of a long-winded answer because there wasn't
We got time.
I know the whole purpose of this podcast is living with intention, but I think in a weird way how I got here was unintentional. And that's kind of the beauty of the journey of like how I'm here and looking back, and I never would have guessed that I'd be sitting at this table speaking with you guys.
Sorry, a cat just jumped on a piano right nearby us. So have you heard that?
It's never happened for like all of these podcast episodes.
I don't know if you guys have like a soundboard over there with sound effects.
Yeah, edit that out. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, but I've always been fascinated by sort of like great design and great architecture, and I didn't study anything related to it, but it's just something that I've always been like intrigued by. And I think it was probably maybe like 2015 or so when the show Tiny House Nation surfaced. I think it was on Netflix at the time, and I just enjoyed like watching these builders create these awesome designs for these people. And at that point I was finishing up college. I think it was like the end of my junior year or so. And I was in the finance and entrepreneurship department. And so basically this whole idea of starting an Instagram page kind of started from an entrepreneurship class. And basically I'm trying to like think back at sort of like what the pivotal point was, but I really don't think there was one, to be completely honest. So I was just being really intrigued with this whole movement surfacing. But so at the time I started an Instagram page through my entrepreneurship class to kind of just gauge some interest and see if people were interested in tiny homes and see like what people thought about them at the time. So this was 2015. So I started posting on there, asking people questions like, how do you define good design, and like what do you need to be happy in your space? Like what's your morning routine? Things like that. Just asking people questions, and sort of kind of snowballed into more people kind of finding the page and being interested. And I kind of just left it and I put it on the back burner, and I went and worked a job for 2 years. And when I got in my job, kind of got into that mundane routine. It was a corporate consulting job, so it was just like traveling every week for 4 or 5 days out of the week, and then only home for about 2 days. And there was a certain point where I just felt really unhappy. And I feel like I'm a happy person. Like, I really do enjoy like the little things in life. And for the first time in my life, I think I felt almost depressed, like really, really unhappy. And so I kind of took a step back and started to reassess like what things were going on in my life and like what I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy. And like always gravitated back to like this whole tiny house thing. And at the time, I never thought of it like a business or anything really. It was just kind of a space to share ideas and meet people and talk with people. And so I started posting more on there, connecting with more people. And then at that point, I decided to quit my job. And I didn't really have much of a plan, but I had lived really frugally for those 2 years, lived well below my means, and was able to save a significant amount of money at that time. So I decided to travel. And so I went on a trip for 8 months. I sold almost like 95% of my belongings, pretty much just what fit in a suitcase in my backpack, all my camera gear, my work stuff, and I took off on an adventure around Southeast Asia. So I went and spent a good amount of time traveling around Russia, Cambodia, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, and did some volunteer work out there. I was teaching English, and I think it was at that point where I realized that like stuff didn't really define me, and that I was a much happier person, kind of like shaving off that baggage, if you will. And kind of through that cleansing process, I like kind of found myself again. And I started to like call back on that inner child and like all that excitement that I had teaching and like just meeting new people around the world. And that was the point where I was like, could I sort of emulate these feelings and could I emulate these experiences back home? And so basically what I came to a conclusion that going tiny was sort of like the best way of sort of shedding all those layers and like all that baggage that I had with stuff, material possessions, financial obligations, and kind of like living a bit of that life here back in the States. And so coming full circle, like when I came back from my trip, I started really looking into like finding a builder or building something myself, and got really serious about pursuing like tiny living. And yeah, found this opportunity to buy this house, and 2 years later, here we are.
That's such an awesome story. I mean, we've been talking with people over this week doing this podcast, and I feel like your story just grabbed like a little piece of everybody we've talked to and smashed it into one big story.
Really?
And yeah, like the idea of this traveling and finding this like this maybe this dissatisfaction with where you were and just going and doing something about it, and all these little bits that you just told us is like, it's just really encompassing what we want to really discuss on this podcast, and what we kind of I guess maybe the point we want to get across to people, this idea of, I even love even how you wrapped it up. It's like you found this new piece of yourself, I guess, this new way, and then you're like, well, how do I go out and do that back in the United States? And so it was almost like, and you can tell me if I'm maybe reading this wrong, you didn't have this desire to go tiny, you had this desire to live in a different way and use living tiny as a tool to accomplish that, if that's a fair statement.
Absolutely. And that ties into kind of this big statement that I live by, and I shared a little bit about that this morning on a post, but I talk a lot about that. It's, for me, it's not about the tiny house, but about the life it affords. And it's always been sort of that at the back of everything, is that, obviously I love tiny houses and I love going and visiting and seeing great design and everything, but for me it's a means to an end. It's trying to find something that I enjoy, waking up in every morning, but it's a tool at the end of the day, and it's helping me get to where I want to be, or helping me live that life right now, which is, it kind of sums it up. Yeah,
no, that's perfect, man. I mean, when you're going back to tiny home design, that's kind of how I approached that design. Whereas this isn't like me trying to get to the end of this tiny home project. It's about me trying to create a beginning for somebody to springboard their lifestyle from, right? So the tiny home is the beginning, not the end, and that's exactly, as you stated. So
I love that.
Alan, I think it's so neat that not only is your life, like your home, a reflection of your values and your lifestyle, but it also looks like your job is as well.
Yeah.
I don't know fully because obviously Kevin and I are new to the tiny home movement, but I met you through Instagram, and I found this Instagram page called Dream Big, Live Tiny, loving the name, and then this guy Alan's behind it, and you look like you have a dream job. You seem so happy, and I'm like, I keep showing Kev, I'm like, Kev, guess where, how does he do this? Like, look where he's at now. And you just seem to be like traveling around the world, getting to tour unbelievable spaces. Now, that's the glamorous Instagram side of it. But
Right.
Can you dive in and tell us, like, what is Dream Big, Live Tiny? What does your day-to-day job look like? And yeah, how do you, like, what are you doing to support yourself like this?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of evolved in a lot of ways over the last few years. So what I do now is nothing what I envisioned doing, years ago when I first started. So it's definitely it's gone through a lot of iterations, and I definitely love my job a lot more now than I used to, probably about 3 years ago. But basically what we do at Dream Big Live Tiny is we're creating like a community of people who are interested in dreaming big, living tiny, and traveling more, essentially, kind of tying the name into it. But, in the beginning of when we started, I think my goal was more so to try to convince people that going tiny was like the best decision they could make. And of course, I know that's not necessarily the best thing for everyone, and not everyone is going to be on board with that, to downsize to a smaller physical space. And so kind of what I learned along the way is that, the amount of people who are actually going to follow through with that, go and meet with builders, and ultimately decide to go tiny is a very, very small percentage of the greater community. And so that's great if you're a builder, right? Because, you only need a handful of people to really believe in your vision, and then you can start creating people's dream homes. For me, it was almost the inverse, where, okay, I kind of realized that not everyone is kind of interested in living the way that I do, but a lot of people are kind of tangentially interested in the idea of living tiny, or at least trying it out. So I kind of, over this last 2 years, I kind of pivoted my focus on showcasing spaces that people could go and stay at for a weekend or stay at for a week, or even, especially with this whole kind of shift in the working culture, where now a lot of people are working remote. A lot of people have been reaching out and saying, hey, can you know of any tiny houses that I can rent for a month, 2 months, 3 months? Because I'm really interested in this lifestyle, but I'm not sure if I can really commit to it 100%. And I just want to try it out. So definitely my business has shifted to showcasing these spaces around the world. And the whole traveling aspect of my job now is something that I've sort of built into it myself. It's not so much that, places in Colombia are reaching out to me saying, hey, come over here and shoot my tiny house. It's more so I'm really manifesting that for myself. And, I'm fronting a lot of the costs and expenses myself and saying, hey, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to make it work. And so that's me sort of building that lifestyle directly into my business, because at the end of the day, my work is going to bleed into my life. And if I'm going to spend a significant amount of time on that, then I better love it. So
yeah, it's like the beautiful double dip, right? It's like, this is what I want to do, and so I might as well make this what I have to do at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
To keep your business moving, and that's a fun way to go about life if you can manage it. And not everybody can. So I guess when you can, you should be grateful for that, because that's a really fun opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think another thing I wanted to touch on when you're talking about your community, the people who are interested in tiny homes, how very few of them are actually going to go tiny. And I think that's totally okay, really.
Yeah.
Because I think that, I guess there's a lot of lessons that are prevalent in the tiny home community and through that lifestyle that are super valuable. For instance, we don't live in a tiny home. We have 4 kids. Our standard home feels pretty tiny to sometimes, right? Yeah. So however, there's these universal truths and these nuggets of wisdom that are just so prevalent in this tiny home movement, that are so valuable to everybody, regardless of how or where you live. And I find that it's one of the most exciting things for us diving into this community and like meeting all these people and, you know, doing interviews with people like you, where it's like we all kind of have these different, we have all these different scenarios and details and all this, but at the end of the day, we have these kind of like these common principles and these common truths that we all seem to resonate with and seem to bring us all a lot of joy and a lot of direction and purpose. And so, I mean, I think it's okay, like you say, it's okay that not everybody wants this in that way.
Well, and I think through these spaces, whether it's through this podcast or through your channel and your work, is the idea of just being able to just encourage our world to just take a pause and really think about how we live and live from a place of value and showcase that and know that it's the little choices that we make every day that lead to a more valuable way of living, whether that is for financial freedom or environmental aspects or the tiny house in the backyard because you care for community and living closer to others, affordable housing. You know, we could go on and on and on as to all of the nuggets of life that come from the tiny home community, and it's fun to have a place to share them here. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely something for everyone in the movement, and that's what I love about it so much, is that everyone has, you know, different rationale or different reasonings for even thinking about it, even kind of tossing around the idea of potentially living tiny. And you know, I about a year or two ago when I quit my job and I traveled, that was kind of the idea I was pursuing by traveling, is that in a way I was kind of already living tiny when I was traveling. You know, I had downsized all my possessions and, you know, cut off a lot of my financial obligations. And so that's kind of what I love to preach, is that there's no like one singular way to go about being a part of this community, and that you can be involved in so many different ways and for so many different reasons. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, our connection and that sense of community that really keeps us all together, and understanding that everyone is doing it for different reasons, and that's totally okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think that honestly, what you're doing by showcasing like some of the, I don't know, can I call it like the brightest spots of like the tiny home like world, as far as like some of the most beautiful things and most interesting things. Honestly, I think that's super important for the movement. Because I mean, there's a lot of practicality in the tiny home movement. There's a lot of things like, you know, you talk with people about housing crisis and like, you know, with poverty stuff and all that. And it's like, that seems like maybe, like, I mean, it seems for us as builders, we're not building low cost tiny homes, right? We're building like luxury tiny homes. And so when we talk to people like that, it's like, well, we're not doing that, right? However, with your page, what you do is you are making the tiny home movement accessible, interesting, cool to people who may never even consider some of these concepts, right? So at some point, you bring people, it's like a gateway into this movement, and once they enter it, because they saw something beautiful or stunning or cool or whatever it may be, once they enter the movement, now they're exposed to all of these ideas that are really, really valuable. And I think it expands the reach of the tiny home movement. And like kind of you said, there's something for everybody. And I think it's important that we widen the spectrum as far as possible. Like, I would encourage anybody to get into the like building, designing, promoting the most cost-effective possible homes, all the way from that to building the most incredible homes that just happen to be tiny, right? And I think we need everything in between as a way to just broaden the appeal and to bring people into the fold, and then those lessons can be learned. So I really appreciate.
I couldn't agree more. It's funny you say that, because I never really thought about it that way. And, you know, obviously there's certain homes that people, you know, that I showcase, and some people just don't find it interesting, but then some people really find it interesting. And so it's fun to learn, you know, what sort of things people are looking for. Some people are strictly, you know, interested in tiny houses on wheels. Some people only want to see tree houses, and some people want to only see, you know, accessory dwelling units on foundations, because that's what they're trying to learn more about. And so I thank you for saying that, because I never really sort of conceptualized it. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, I'm trying as much as I can as well to make the movement accessible and really showcase that there really is no wrong way to kind of think of this movement, and that there's something for everyone here.
Right.
Well, since we're talking that way, like, tell me, what is, or maybe it's a couple, what is your favorite spaces that you've gone to? Because you've seen
Wow.
a lot.
I've seen quite a bit. I haven't seen enough, but I've seen quite a few very, very incredible homes. Some that stand out to me, maybe I'll start there, because I definitely don't have a favorite, an absolute favorite, but some that really stand out was, so in Colombia, I visited a handful of houses. Again, these were things that I found once I was there. This one in particular is located in Guatapé, which is this little like lake town about an hour and a half outside of Medellin, Colombia, and it's right on the lake. So I posted this video maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and it's a little lake cabin. It's probably only about 140, 150 square feet, but it has this beautiful wraparound deck and this jacuzzi just facing the lake. It's absolutely unreal. Yeah, so that was one of my favorite spaces. And unfortunately, it rained for about like a day and a half while we were there. We were there for 2 nights. And when I got there, I was really bummed because I mean, I was going there to film it as well. So it kind of messes with the filming timeline when it's pouring. But I think for the first time, like I set my camera down and I was just like looking out the window and just like mesmerized by all the scenery outside. And I think for the first time in a while, I like paused and reflected and like took everything in. And it's just not something that I get to do often, because a lot of times I'm just kind of running and gunning and shooting and doing this and doing that. And it brought me a lot of peace being out there, and really enjoyed that space. Let's see, some other ones. I did really enjoy the one that I stayed at earlier this week. I don't know if you guys saw it on my stories, but I visited this tree house. They call it a tree house, but it's actually kind of set up more of like a garage apartment, upstairs garage apartment, because they built this massive like 2-car garage under the livable structure, and the living space is on that second floor. But it sits in that, I think it's 700, just over 700 square feet. And, you know, maybe like 2 years ago, I probably wouldn't have posted about this house, because over the years, I've gotten a lot of pushback on showcasing anything that's above 500 square feet. And it always kind of surprises me when people actually get mad when I showcase something over 500 square feet. And you know, you have the tiny house purists where they're like, this is not a tiny house, and that's okay. You know, there's that sweet spot between that 500 and 800 or 500 and 900 square feet that a lot, I feel like, and this is something that I'm really starting to showcase more of, but I feel like there's that sweet spot of that middle ground for those that don't really feel like they can get down to that 150, 250 square foot tiny house, but they definitely are in line with downsizing. And so I think it's that perfect compromise for someone who has kids, someone who has a family or significant other that is not on board with living in a tiny house on wheels. And so right now I'm really, really excited about showcasing those smaller homes. I'm not going to call them tiny homes because I won't hear the end of it. But showcasing these spaces that are still small and designed super efficiently and beautifully, most importantly. And I'm really, really enjoying experiencing those spaces as well. And this one in particular, the thing that really caught my eye was, I think they had like 24 windows, like on wow, 3 different sides, and just tons of natural light coming in, just an absolutely beautiful space. And I felt it was a very elevated experience, so I felt very luxurious just even walking around the home, which I don't get to feel very often. Yeah.
Well, the thing about like people being critical of that, I mean, at the end of the day, like you're looking at beautiful, effective living spaces, right? And that effectiveness can be like brought from a whole bunch of different areas, right? Whether whatever size it may be. I mean, in fact, the design that I'm working on right now is going to be our largest. It's going to be about 620 square feet, and it'll have a second story that's going to get dropped on top. And it's like totally different. I struggle to call it a tiny home, I suppose, but
right.
I mean, it's a matter of perspective. It's like, where are you coming from, right? And
yeah,
what do you,
absolutely.
You know? So if you're moving from a 2,500 square foot however many bedroom home into a 620 square foot home. That's very tiny.
Yeah.
Right?
Feel free to call it tiny.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think that we maybe have the need or the, well, whatever. We don't need to define things so rigidly like that. And at the end of the day, if it's a beautiful, high quality, effective home that's going to foster the life that those people would like to live and a healthy lifestyle, then I mean, all the power to them, right? So
absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
That's cool that you're branching out on that a bit.
Yeah. No, it's been really fun to kind of seek out these spaces and most importantly, like gauge a response, see if this is even interesting to people. That's why I try to like put up polls when I do this, ask people like, are you even interested in this? Because I didn't ask anyone initially. I just said, hey, I think there's going to be some people interested in this, and yeah, I got a really, really good response of people who kind of want to see something in that middle ground. So I think definitely I don't know if I'll define a word for it, but
yeah,
they're beautiful spaces at the end of the day. So I don't think I need to.
Don't need to apologize for that, hey?
No, absolutely not.
So Alan, like in essence, like you are a creator. Your job is behind a camera and capturing these spaces, and you also live quite publicly in that your face is on Instagram. You show us day-to-day life on the tiny home. You're out and about. As a creator, like how do you handle the criticism or the pressure or that aspect of having such a public life? I guess maybe what I'm getting at is, how does Alan live? How do you handle that? Like, what are some things in your life that keep you sane amidst your job?
That's a great question. I think the hardest thing for me personally as a creator isn't so much the criticism, but it's not having coworkers. Like I don't have any workers that I are able to kind of see on a daily, regular basis. Of course, I've collaborated with people in the past and occasionally will work with people, but I think that's probably the hardest thing for me. But as far as criticism, I definitely get some every now and then, and it's probably very benign compared to some other creators out there, and I can't complain whatsoever. But I try to approach everything from more so like a lens of it's not necessarily me. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. I just think that some people kind of want to box you into a certain thing that they think you should be posting or showcasing. I think I got some pushback like when I started to even put my face on my channel. So it wasn't until fairly recently, probably about a year or so ago, kind of like when I started living tiny, because I thought people would be interested in kind of seeing more of this day-to-day life. It was around then when I started to kind of share more about my personal life and share more about what it's really like to live in this space. And for a while people were like, I didn't even know that you were the face behind this or whatever. Mm-hmm. And people were like, I just want to see the houses. Like, I don't care to see, what you're doing in your tiny house. I was like, okay, that's fair. Like, I understand. You probably never saw my face for the first 2 years, and then all of a sudden I'm showing up. But yeah, I mean, I definitely do still get some criticism, and I honestly try to approach it like from just a humor standpoint. Like, I love reading comments, like people are, they didn't wake up in a great mood, but it's okay. The thing that keeps me sane is going to the gym. Honestly, it's a big thing that keeps me grounded. And I try to go every day around like noon or so to break up my workday. And so that's really worked for me to not only like split the day in half, but I come back feeling really, really energized when I come back around like 2 or so. And I'm more of a night owl, so I'm not very productive in the morning, but in that afternoon and night session, I'm a lot more productive. And yeah, that helps to keep me grounded a lot. And just a lot of like routines in my tiny house as well. Like I got really into brewing my own like coffee and grinding my beans here. And that whole process like in the morning has been kind of very like almost meditative for me, and really enjoy like having mornings for myself. It's kind of cliche. I talk about this a little bit on my YouTube channel, but just being more mindful in those like everyday things that we do has really helped me as well to stay grounded and to just like appreciate everything around me. And that's really helped me.
I love that. In another episode, Ashley, our first tiny home client, she talks about how to incorporate meditation into our day-to-day when life can just get so busy. And she actually has an analogy of, well, she just talks about taking 5 minutes with her coffee and just being present and tuning into all 5 senses. And so as you say that, it made me think of that, because I'm like, I can imagine you in the process of grinding the coffee and listening to that and the aroma that comes and making something and then enjoying it. And our life is so incredibly busy. We have distractions all over us. Even like I'm noticing too, like the draw to even pick up the phone first thing in the morning to check, where it's like, no,
Right.
that doesn't have power over me. I don't need to start my day there. Starting the day with something, with some routine that is very grounding, very mindful, and very thoughtful. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because it's just kind of...
No, I love that.
Yep. Very cool.
Yeah.
What's next for you? What's on your dream list of where you'd like to take your business or be involved?
That's a great question. I'm really excited about what I started doing recently. I think it was about 6 or 8 months ago when I started this whole YouTube channel and started to film sort of more longer form tours. I've always been really intrigued with film. I took film in high school. I was always that kid that was making, movies at home and annoying everyone in my family because I took a camera everywhere. But so I'm really intrigued with kind of seeing where film takes me and combining that with sort of like living tiny and exploring like maybe creating stories of other people that are not only living tiny, but maybe also like hosting tiny houses. So I think for me, like a big goal for me would be to consider the idea of producing something even longer form, like maybe on like a documentary scale. Of course, that's pretty far along the journey, but it's something that I'm definitely working towards and building my skills along the way with these shorter, like 10 to 15 minute videos. I think should help along the way. But I'm just really passionate about sharing stories and storytelling, more importantly. And that's something that I'm still working on, my craft and everything, but I love it so much. I love the filmmaking aspect of the work that I do. And so pursuing something related to that is what really, really gets me up out of bed every morning.
I love it that you have that's like a big lofty goal, man. Like
That's
pretty cool. If you've just started,
kind of made me sweat a little bit when I said it.
Now you said it out loud. What, you can't have a choice now, right?
I know.
You know what?
It's on the public record.
We spoke. Yeah, exactly. We spoke with actually some good friends of ours who went on a huge traveling trip, and they said the way that they make sure it happens is they have the idea and they tell everybody they know. And they say that way it's like this accountability that they're like, okay, we're actually going to do it because we told everybody we would, right? So
right. Let it be known that
let it be known.
You shared it
there
with
us.
And
it's happening. I can't tell you when, but it's going to happen.
But on the larger scale, though, man, I love that. It's a big goal. It's it seems like maybe it's far off, but you're starting 6 or 8 months ago with these these 10-minute, 15-minute tours, and it's like you don't start with a documentary. You start with one step. Yeah. And you just work it out. You hone your craft, and it's. I mean, I've said this before too, but we built our house. We were 23. We just got married, and we built our house. I'd never built a house before, and if I tried to get out of bed every morning, being like, I'm going to build a house today, I never would have got out of bed, right? But it was more so. It's like I'm getting out of bed, and it's like, I'm going to build this roof line today. And then you do it, you get it done, and you'd be like, yeah, that was a good day. And then the next day you get out of bed, it's like, I'm building this floor today, right? And you get out of bed, it's like, that's a good day, I got it done. And if you said, I'm going to film a documentary today, you might never get out of bed, right? So you just got to take those steps, right?
Take it one day at a time, and
that's right.
It's a learning process at the end of the day. And
yeah, that's exciting and motivating, right?
Very much
That's
so.
awesome.
Very much so.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely it started a little bit earlier. The YouTube channel is fairly new, but
okay.
I I got really intrigued with filmmaking kind of around when I started traveling, actually. And so I set a goal for myself to create a 1-minute video every single day while I was traveling. And that was a lofty goal. It became very, very difficult pretty early on. It's just something about, scripting, filming, editing, and exporting and uploading in a foreign country with extremely slow upload rates. That became very, very difficult very fast. So I think for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was hitting my daily goal, and then I started to drop off. It was like every other day, and then every 3 days. But I think at the end of the day, I think I was traveling for about 8 months. I ended up producing a little over 100 1-minute videos. And of course, it wasn't anywhere near my original goal, but I had something that, helped me build my skill set, and something I was really proud of, and something more importantly that I could look back on. They were memories at the end of the day. And, that kind of catapulted my interest in pursuing something related to this through my work. And at that point, it was a passion project, but slowly snowballed into me just kind of saying, why can't I do this with, tiny houses and storytell through this medium?
That's very cool.
That's awesome. I love the idea and the message there. That's just all about those things that you feel that are passions in your heart, the things that you want to work towards in life, the values that you have. Just start, and it's little incremental steps, like small goals. Those goals may meander along the way. You're gonna fail. You're gonna get back up and try again. But it's just that intention we set every day to live the life that we truly want. That really gets us to where we want to be in life, which is something of meaning and value.
Yeah.
And just to make you feel a little bit better, I know everybody is annoyed by the guy with the camera at the time, but they all love him after the fact when they get to watch the stuff he created, right? So I'm more annoyed than most, actually. But we're always grateful at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for the opportunity to kind of, I guess, maybe peel back the curtain as to who's Alan at Dream Big, Live Tiny. Thank you for sharing parts of your story with us today. It's been so interesting, and you are a real bright light in the tiny home movement, and we're grateful for you and your work. We're wrapping up every...
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We're wrapping up every podcast by asking our guests the same question, and you can answer this as light or as deep as you want. But Alan, what's bringing you joy these days?
For me right now, I think it's kind of reconnecting with people that I lost touch with when the pandemic started. I think that's really been a bright light for me. It's reconnecting with family members, reconnecting with friends that maybe I hadn't spoke with for 10 years since I graduated high school, reconnecting with old college friends. That for me has been a huge blessing in disguise with everything that has happened the last year and a half, and just feeling more connected to people that I really love, and also continuing to reach out and build new connections and meeting new people. I think at the end of the day, that's why I'm happy, is the connections that I have and the people that I meet along the way. It's obviously the work is fulfilling, and I love what I do for a living, but it wouldn't be what it is without the connections and the real people behind the screens at the end of the day. So that's what's bringing me joy these days.
That's great, man. Well, hey, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to connect here today, and thank you for your time. We're grateful for it, and we appreciate the work you're doing out there and your perspective on life.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, and finally getting to speak to you guys. I know I've been following you guys along for, what's it been now? Almost 2 years since you guys started or built your first home? Yeah.
Getting close.
Yeah. I'm super, super excited to see where you guys head next, and always super excited to see your builds and to share them with everyone. Everyone always asks me about your guys' work, and I have nothing but good things to say about you guys. So it's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
We appreciate that. Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, Alan.
Thanks for listening to our conversation with Alan. For more on Alan, you can check him out on Instagram at Dream Big Live Tiny or on his YouTube channel, Dream Big Live Tiny. And if you want to know when our next podcast episode comes out, click the notification button, give us a follow on YouTube. And, every day we show up on Instagram at fritztinyhomes.com. That's a good place to find out where we're at in our build schedule, what's happening next, and, hobby farm stuff every day.
Thanks, guys.